Good morning. I wanted to just share a few thoughts on the passage for this week. This won't be long at all, but maybe just some conversation starters, something to consider, something to think about. And so I hope everyone's doing well. Those that have come down with the COVID, those who've been exposed to it, that they've hopefully stayed healthy, and the ones that have it are recovering quickly, we hope. The first passage for today is Psalm 24, and it starts off and says, "The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers." Psalm 24, and that's the chapter right after probably the most famous psalm, Psalm 23. The earth is the Lord's and all it contains. I think that's a phrase that could mean a couple of different things, at least. That when something belongs to someone, it's theirs to use however they see fit. And so you could take that understanding of this passage and say, the world is God's. He can use it however he wants. If he chooses to bless it, if he chooses to do harm to it, to destroy it, whatever it may be, it's his and it's his to use. The other way, and I think it goes with the passage this morning, is in it's the first view, the one that I just mentioned, is very authoritarian, very God doesn't have to answer to anyone. God can do what God wishes. The second view is the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, all that it contains, is created by God, and it's within God's realm of consciousness, within God's awareness, within God's concern. And so to me, this is a much more compelling view for us as Christians to take, is what if we viewed the world and all that it contains as within the realm of, for lack of a better term, realm of Godness, within God's awareness, maybe that's the best word I can come up with, that God looks over it and he sees it and he blesses things, he calls them good. When things lose their way, God then calls them back. He goes and searches for such things. I think if the first view is adopted, it's more easy to just say, well, they're going to get what they have coming. God's going to bring the hammer down. But if we look at the world as everything belonging to God, everything created by God, everything has God's fingerprints all over it, so to speak, maybe it would change how we speak to and about the people that we encounter on a daily basis. The main passage is Matthew chapter 22, and it starts in verse 15, and this is right after the parable of the marriage feast that we discussed last week. It says, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap Jesus in what he said. And they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, 'Teacher, we know that you're truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any.'" So they're really buttering Jesus up here. The Pharisees develop a plan, and they send their disciples and the Herodians. And if you see the disciples of the Pharisees, if you see the Pharisees spending time with the Herodians, you know something is up, something is not right. I don't know what that would be, the parallel today, maybe even Democrats and Republicans. But they get together and they come and they flatter Jesus and they say, "We know that you're truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any." And almost they're setting Jesus up, I think, here to, if he shares an answer to their question, he can't say that he got it or heard it from somewhere. It came only from him. And so you don't show partiality. You speak the way of truth. You defer to no one. So whatever you're about to say, Jesus, it's straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Verse 17, "Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not?" So just like in the South, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they had poll taxes to try to discourage the poorer population from voting, and it was kind of a way to the wealthier people were the smarter people who had better ideas about how the world should work, and so only they should vote. So let's charge money so that certain people don't have access to voting. They had it back then in Rome as well. Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their malice and said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the poll tax." And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went away. And then the Sadducees come up next. So group after group is trying to figure out how they can put Jesus in a spot that he can't get out of. And so the question begins here with the poll tax, and so it's a very political question. Should we pay this money to Caesar, who's going to misuse it? And as we talked about a few weeks ago in church, that the Mennonites, some don't believe that they should have paid taxes because it's used by the government for immoral, to immoral ends. And so they wouldn't pay taxes. In this case, the question is, should we pay poll tax to Caesar? And interestingly, Jesus kind of changes the discussion. So he says, "Bring me a coin." They produce it right away, which I think is indicative of how prevalent Caesar's empire was, how the money was around. Even the Jewish folks in this scenario were probably carrying it. And he says, "Whose likeness and inscription is on the coin?" And they said, "Caesar's." Then give to Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and to God the things that belong to God. Now, I've heard this preached so many times, and I don't think there's really a better way to see it. Maybe if you have a different way, you can share it in the comments. But Caesar's image was on that coin, and the Caesar, just like the Pharaoh, they thought that they were the son of God. And so in this case, Caesar's image was placed on the coin, and that gave the coin value and tradability and so forth. And so Caesar's image is on the coin. Jesus says, since the image is already on there, then that belongs to Caesar. The government in that day, I don't think is much different from the government today. The overreach, the expanding of the government, how far its arm reaches out into different things, just grew and grew and grew. In this case, Caesar placed his likeness on the coin. But then the question is, what is God's likeness placed upon? And so Psalm 24 says, everything in the earth, even money in a sense, but more specifically, according to Genesis 1, when God created humanity, we were made in the likeness and the image of God, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. And so the money in this case belonged to Caesar. Jesus says, let Caesar have that, but give to God the things that are God's. And I do believe that we come up with a lot of solutions with how to deal with this world, how to fix the problems, how to make things better and right. And a lot of times it comes at the expense of other human beings that are created in the image and have the likeness of God stamped upon them in the same way that Caesar's coin did. And Psalm 24 makes abundantly clear, as does Jesus and his words and so much of the scripture, that every single person has this likeness within them. And so whenever we are having a bad day, we want to say and think and believe certain things about other people, that the compassion goes out the window, and that we're out to achieve God's ends and means, and this person is standing in the way, so therefore I have the right to take them down. We never have that right. If what I'm saying here is true, and if this way of reading scripture is correct, that every single human being that's roaming the face of this earth has the image of God placed upon them, within them. They're standing as God's image, however you want to phrase that. Every animal was created by God, every living organism. And so the way we move and act, and the way we are in this world, the way we treat God's creation, the way we treat one another, Jesus says here, give those things to God. And hopefully, if we do well in exercising and thinking in this way, that we will see that our enemies are fewer and fewer. We'll see that sometimes humans in God's creation get just as confused as we do, that people tend to lose their ways in the same way that we lose our ways from time to time, and that hopefully compassion, forgiveness, kindness can be the order of the day, regardless of where this person stands in relation to us and whatever ends we're hoping to achieve. And so to me, that's the message of this. It's nothing groundbreaking, but very convicting, and I think we could spend a lifetime trying to figure out how to practice that in the way that Jesus would have us to practice it, how to implement this way of seeing. It's very, very basic, but I think it's not too prevalent in the world around us. So I pray that it would become more in each of our lives, mine included. So again, I hope everyone's well. I hope you enjoy a Sunday off, that you can be with family or do something that you enjoy. So we'll see you guys next week, possibly. We'll kind of play it by ear how this week goes. So have a good rest of your weekend. Thanks.